So Syneos is a company that works throughout the continuum, all the way from clinical trials, preclinic to commercialization of products. So we see a lot of patients along the way, from recruiting for the clinical trials to actually commercializing for the patients that can benefit the most for the products. We do anywhere for more than 1,000 trials at any given point. So it's a lot of patients that we work with.
No, fantastic, fantastic, awesome. And Ryan, we'd love to hear a little bit about yourself. We've had the pleasure with working with Televu at HITLAB, and we'd love to hear about what you've been doing and maybe some of the work that you've done with HITLAB too.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thanks for inviting me. Ryan Dalarami, I'm the founder and CEO of Televu, and so Televu brings you an ecosystem of connected care using multiple modalities. So if you think of digital health and virtual care, everybody kind of thinks about the video aspect of the communication. So we bring it to a next level, which includes different types of video from multiple feeds with multiple form factors and with the added element of augmented reality and artificial intelligence.
Fantastic, no, wonderful. And Ryan, I believe you're exhibiting tomorrow. So those of you who are in person and lucky enough to be coming tomorrow, please do check out Ryan's exhibit table tomorrow, where he'll be demoing Televu to all the attendees. Now, with health equity being such a massive hot button now in healthcare, and of course now in digital health, Divya, we'd love to hear a little bit more about the experiences that you've had, both at Syneos and beyond as well, around patient experiences and the work that you were doing, and health equity and access to care and how they're all interconnected.
So I think the first and foremost objective of any policymaker or a health system or even innovators is to make sure that we get the right products. We have developed innovative solutions that are not just equitable but also accessible. Otherwise, this whole system doesn't work. So there are a lot of similarities, whether we start looking at patient access or we start thinking about health equity. And I think the presenter before us talked a little bit about health equity. When we go there, I think there are certain things that have happened from all three angles, right? Whether it's policymakers or manufacturers. One of the things if you look at it, about 5 or 6 things that stand out. First is the clinical trial diversity. And I think that's a big step, where FDA is asking all the trials to have diverse patient populations. And that really helps us make sure that we are looking at all kinds of different race, gender, ages. So when the product comes out, it's as efficacious and as safe for all patient populations. Because the clinical trial is a small sample, but when it actually comes into the market, is it still efficacious? That's important. Then you look at affordability, which is another big aspect, right? Are the patients able to afford the product? And in that respect, I think manufacturers have done a really good job. We have patient access programs where you can get it for a minimal cost for those who can't afford, or sometimes it's even free. But you also have patient assistance programs such that you have co-pay cards, so that anybody who's in that borderline doesn't qualify for free product, are you still able to get that product? And we see that more and more happening. And I think that really helps the affordability aspect of it, which again goes back to our patient access and equity. The other key part, I think, is education. And we understand this, right? This is all socioeconomic conditions that result in health inequity. And are we educating them? Are we looking at those populations, trying to talk to them in their own language? Maybe culturally they're different. Are we making provisions so that they are able to understand? And we know this, right? There are some low-income communities that are more susceptible to certain kind of disease. Are we educating them? Are we giving them the right tools to ask the right questions when they get to physician? Are they able to afford physician? And you are all in digital health, so you know this, having telehealth capabilities so that communities that can't afford to maybe go to a very far off place, maybe they don't have the money to see a doctor who's a specialist, can we do something with telehealth where they can still have accessibility to that? Another very small thing, but extremely important, is food labeling. And I think that came from the policymakers, right? We are not all nutritionists, but having the label to say, hey, this is more than 100% of your daily intake in terms of sugar, helps make choices for those patients who can't be that person who's very well educated. They can still make healthier choices. And I think That's another big improvement that has come up. Another one is partnerships. More and more companies and hospitals are partnering with community advocacy groups to understand the pain of the patients. What are the challenges? Is it just transportation? Is it the language barrier? Is it you don't understand what a certain label means, or certain even basic clinical trial, if you want to apply for it, do you have a form in their language? Like, are they able to read everything? When they consent, do they understand what they're signing up? Basic things like that. And last but not the least, I would say, even companies, when we are hiring, we are looking for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that's a huge part of how we make this access and equitable, things happen. Because now when people are working on those products, whether they are scientists, whether they are people who are trying to bring it to market, they understand their communities better than anybody else. So are they speaking the language that these specific communities will understand? So it's not just a group of people that don't understand all the different dynamics trying to do something. It's all these people coming together, being part of that decision making, part of that innovation, that really bring this access to the patients. So I think it's a very connected world, and technology helps immensely to bring all of this together, but they are connected, and I think we have to do a multi-pronged approach to ensure that we are working on all these aspects.
Yeah, no, I think that's, you put it in such a really amazing sort of holistic way in terms of really looking at it in terms of the overview of, how we drive that, interconnectivity of health equity and access to care and the patient experiences by having those education pieces that can't live without the monetary and the affordability rates, as well as getting to really understand that there's also the whole idea of being able to tie in all of those different pieces that you mentioned too, with technology sort of being the adhesive that puts everything together. So I'd love to bring you in here, Ryan, being a technologist, of course, and letting us know from your point of view with the technology that you're developing right now, that really focuses around sort of that telehealth piece, how that works in terms of the form of telehealth and how that increases access, and ultimately like how that increases health equity as a whole to sort of bring everything together.
Absolutely. I think I want to step back a little bit and say, why do we even have digital health? I think at the end of the day, it's all about clinical decision making. So prior to the pandemic, we all had seen that people go to visit their physician inpatient. Because of the pandemic, things changed. Now you have to have other means of doing it. Now, when you go to a patient bedside, making the decision is important. And if you make it in a timely fashion, that could mean difference in outcomes. Now, if you don't have the right tools to communicate with your peers, so there's digital health, which focuses on patient, there's patient to physician communication, but there's physician to physician or peer-to-peer communication. And that's where we're really focused on. So bringing faster clinical decision-making tools to the forefront, which by itself brings access to care. So if you are living in an area that does not have a specialist, you could easily get connected with that specialist through your primary care provider. The other aspect we've heard Dr. Berger talked about it, Divya talked about it, is accessibility and affordability. So affordability is important. Like sometimes we're talking about the monetary value of the product, which is important, but at the end of the day, can the system afford it? What I mean by that is, does this technology bring enough efficiencies in place, builds enough capacity, and brings access to care for the population health, not just for a small population? So I think all these take a big part of what goes into a technology and when we develop that technology. We also heard Dr. Berger and Divya talk about simple things like language. Like we've had this in Canada as well. There's an indigenous population in Canada which lives in certain communities, but none of the digital health technologies have their language translated, and there's no resource for it. So every single time you talk to these communities, the single thing that they say, oh, we don't even understand what this is. So I think these are some of the things that as technology developers we have to think about. We have to make sure that the technology that we bring forward is not designed for the Harvard Medicals of the world. It's designed for every little center, clinical center in every corner of the globe. So I think that's a very important piece, and our focus has been on bringing that elements together.
No, that's really wonderful. I really like how you sort of tied in now the sort of the physician really getting involved within getting patients to really understand how to build that sort of health equity, both within the community and for themselves and their families as well. Now, I know we're sort of wrapping up here because we've only got the 50 minutes, of course, and you both spoke really beautifully about the here and now in terms of where we are with health equity and inclusion and diversity and how technologies bring that all together. Being the technologist that you are, of course, Ryan, and the work that you're doing right now, Divya, with Syneos, I'd love to hear from your points of view, like what the future of technology looks like to you, and also what health equity also looks like from your standpoint too, and if there is maybe one of the specific points around affordability or accessibility or education that you think is probably the most important piece that needs to be driven right now.
Absolutely. I don't think there's any shortage of cool stuff when it comes to technology. Like, every company has lots of different ways of presenting you with technologies that look great. But what does it do for the patient? What does it do for the health system? I think the future of healthcare and digital health is going to be focused on that. Again, I go back to Dr. Berger's comment about the senior population that don't have digital literacy. So does that mean that they shouldn't have access to digital healthcare? Could we not have potential community sort of platforms for them to go to the technology as opposed to bringing technology to them? So there are different ways that we have to think about when we're delivering our technology. It's not just direct to the physician, direct to the patient, or in between. There should be some element of community involvement to make sure that everybody has access to that piece of technology, not just because they don't have internet. And we have another good example of that in one of the indigenous communities. They put a Starlink dish in one of the care centers, and patients actually go to that care center to access internet, not just for digital health, but for their day-to-day activities as well. So it's all those different elements of technology that comes into play, and it's not the cool factor, in my opinion.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's really, really good points. And Divya, bring us home.
So I guess I would be remiss if I don't mention AI and ML and the large language models. It's something we have seen that really is helping a lot. And I'll give you a few examples, right? Like DeepMind from Google. It's reducing the drug discovery time. It not only helps bring the cost down because now you're not spending as much in research, it's getting the products to the patients sooner, which is for some rare diseases, it's extremely important. They're a small population, but extremely important we get to them as soon as possible. Then you also have tools like, Medaware. So many products getting approved, so close names, right? It's so hard. It's easy now because now physicians are not writing on paper and somebody's misreading, but even selecting from a drop down, two products sound so same. How do you select the right one? Mm-hmm. It at least gives you an alert to say, hey, this patient is not diagnosed for this. Are you really prescribing? Basic things like that, right? That really help. And then if you also look at some of the predictive analytics that we've been doing, finding the right patient so that we can recruit faster for the trials, also understanding what kind of patients benefit the most, what protocols are, relayed back to the patient. So we are going after the right populations. Mm-hmm. All of that actually really helps bring back to Ryan's point, not just the health equity aspect, the patient affordability access piece, but also brings us closer to where we need to be because technology is moving fast. Are we keeping up with it? There will be some places where we have to go back and redo things, but at least it's 80% there. And I think one example, last one for me, we used to do patient journeys, right? To really understand where is the patient. It's a 12-week exercise. You interview a lot of patients, you build the journey, then you go back to patients and say, hey, is this what it looks like? It was a 12-week, very intense exercise. And one of our teams recently did this now in less than 3 days.
Yeah.
And they used large language models to look into all discussion boards, all of the support groups, the patient advocacy groups, to understand the sentiments of the patients and bring it all together. So we only had to do one session back to the patients to say, does this make sense? And it was 97% accurate. So just cutting that time, understanding the patient, and again, patients respond back to the questions you ask, but by doing it something like this in AI, you're answering a lot more and getting a lot more answers for questions you didn't even know you should ask. So I think from that perspective, future is bright. We're getting there. It'll take a few iterations, I guess, to get there where we need to be, but it's very promising.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. Thank you so much, guys. Ryan, Divya, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts with the audience, both in person and online.